everyone, my name is Christian and I'm a mix engineer. Today we've got Ambidextrous by Connor Price Nic D. Let's dive in. So this one was produced by Graham. This is another kind of easier, low track count songs. So we have a kick snare, hat, risers, bass, and then a sample. There's some other things that I added that I'll dive into in a minute. But for starters, there's drums here. And now, if you've seen any of my videos, you know that I have a collection of favorite plugins here. The first one being this transient shaper. This transient shaper, let me be clear, it's like a compressor for dummies, okay? It just kind of shapes the waveform. And so for these drums, especially on this kick, in my opinion, the kick was too long, especially with how long and kind of linear this 808 is. I'll dive into that in a minute. But here, for starters, you can see I did a little bit of attack, but mainly sustained to where the kick isn't trailing out as long. So listen to this. So it's a little bit more of the just to give the kick the attack. But then once that attack is out, the 808 kind of lets it shine, and the 808 kind of takes over the low end. So in my opinion, I didn't think we needed the kick to be super long, especially with the 808 being so linear. And I did kind of the same thing for the snare. And so now I need to get this tattooed on my forehead. If you have seen my videos, you know that I love a good high pass. And I say this all the time on stuff. You just don't need the low end on some of these like snare samples, hi-hat samples. Just clean up the low end on pretty much everything, because the only thing that really needs to take up the low end, and especially the subharmonic kind of 160 hertz below, is really just the kick and bass. It's pretty rare, different genres too, but it's pretty rare, especially in hip hop, where you need anything to be that low that's not the bass. So take a look, listen to snare with and without. I don't know that you're going to be able to hear this super well on like headphones off a phone, but you can just kind of listen if you have a good set of speakers here. Just a little bit of that over time, like if you have a bunch of tracks that do that, it just adds up, and doing this really cleans the low end up. And then same transient shaper here, exact same thought process, a little bit of attack, a little bit less sustain, so it's a little bit more of the pop, pop. And then on the hi-hat, exact same deal. Get rid of the low end on this stuff. Add some attack, take away some of the sustain. So then you have drums that kind of sound like this. It makes it a little bit more, it kind of helps it stand out a little bit more. And then on my drum bus, add this to the list here. One of my favorite saturation plugins. I didn't really do a whole lot other than kind of switch the depth and harmonics, and then I drove it with this +6 button that I like using every so often. And then finally this low latency limiter that I use literally all the time, just for glue. Just for drum bus glue. And now let's move on to risers and 808. Risers don't have anything like, let's take a listen. Yeah, in my opinion, you don't really have to do a whole lot to perk stuff, unless it's the high pass thing. So let's dive into the bass. I talked about this on my Instagram video about this song, but let me dive into this a little bit more here. So I have a sidechain bus right here being keyed into the 808 right here. So my settings on the compressor are super fast attack, super fast release, kind of chilled out ratio. You don't really need a crazy ratio. And then the threshold to taste, just so you get that like 3 to 6 dB gain reduction. So let's take a listen to what that's doing. And now usually you mess with the attack, so you kind of don't go all the way too fast, so it's not clicking. Clearly I'm listening to this now, I didn't go fast or slow enough, afforded to like go 400 to 500, maybe even full milliseconds here, like go here or something like that, but whoops. And then little note here, if you're doing the sidechain thing and you want to hear the sidechain working without soloing the kick, like you just kind of want to hear what the 808's doing on its own, you hit this pre button. This pre goes before the volume, before the solo button, before all the plugins of the channel that you're working on, so which is the kick. Like if I did this, it would just be the 808 without the sidechain, and this is with the sidechain because the kick, because this bus is now receiving what the kick is hitting. Just a little tip there. And then lastly, before I jump into some of the other production here, Graham finished it with a sample, and it's this pretty cool kind of vocal acoustic harmonica thing. It's pretty sweet. There's a couple things I did to this. First off, I really like Ozone's mid-side EQ. Hot take, I like using mid-side EQs a lot. Now, it's a pretty dangerous game because you can do it wrong pretty easily. But for this, I usually do a lot of work on the mid because I want to create room for vocals. But in this particular case, there was just kind of this honky thing that I needed to get out of the way here so you can hear it. kind of yucky. And then I just finished off with that saturator, just pick it up. And now, so that's all the stuff that Graham sent. And so when Connor sent me all of these tracks, he was like, hey, feel free to add some production stuff if you hear it. And so I definitely heard some stuff on this. I also heard some stuff on Dabble, I think I added. But this one, I just felt like, because it was kind of that honky-tonk hip-hop, country vibe, I could add a little bit of the bluegrass element, which I've done before on some other country stuff. And so I added a banjo, an acoustic, and this kind of slide electric thing here. Now, let me preface here. Okay, so it's Friday. The album dropped today. We finished these mixes a week ago, and I'm telling you that because there was a little bit of a scramble to just kind of get these songs done. And so when he said add some production, I was like, okay, sure. And now normally when I'm adding production, I do it in a different, session or whatever. But this time I was just like, okay, let me mix it and just see what it needs, which is a fine thought process. But you kind of get into this like blurred line of production and mixing, and you'll see here what I mean. I started recording these banjo parts, which is cool, but then you can see I just started dumping plugins on this. And looking back, I'm like, man, this didn't need not any of this, but there was just a lot of unnecessary stuff here. And I'll go through each one right now. So here's the banjo part. Stereo track, super easy. Here's a channel strip. Which is cool. That treatment's already great. A little saturation doesn't hurt, right? And then another EQ, because I was hearing kind of this honky thing. Fine, that's cool. And then this is where things get crazy, where I'm like losing my mind here because I didn't switch my production brain off. I just started going for it. Transient shaper, like what did I really need more pick sound from the banjo from? And then, so normally when I double track stuff, just for my own brain's sake, my organizational sake, I like to have these stereo track things foldered up so I can like think and automate and not have to, kind of worry what's going on there. But then on this bus, I said, right after the transient shaper, I added a limiter, which doesn't make any sense. But it sounds fine, whatever. And I probably should have left it at that. Now, there's this extra EQ here that as I listen back, I remember thinking in the outro, oh, this needs to stand out more. So listen to this on its own, and then I'll play the whole outro for you, and you'll understand what I'm doing here. It's so ugly. But in context of the outro, it just helps it stand out more. So here, I'll turn it off. Anyways, just being honest with you guys. Made some crazy mix choices that I don't recommend, but it worked. Same thing for the acoustic, not too bad. Same channel strip situation going on. I really like this SSL channel strip, by the way. And then some tape stuff to kind of help it feel like it was played through like kind of a real tube situation. The same limiter on the acoustic bus. Let me just play this all for you so you can kind of hear what's going on here. Added soothe because I hated some of the frequencies that was going on up there. And then this final EQ thing, it's the same thing that I had last time where I was like, I need it to pop more. But you know what, that one's not as crazy as the banjo. I actually kind of like that final EQ, it really helped. And then lastly, there's this electric guitar thing I added. First off, I doubled the banjo part at the end. But there's also this kind of riser thing I added, that like a slide guitar kind of situation. But I didn't have a slide, so use the pen. Nice one like this. It worked. All right, here's the music all together. All right, let's dive into the vocals. Okay, if you've seen any of my videos before, which is probably 5 of you, but it's the same thought process. And now, before I get into this, I want to explain something super important. So I have a template that has the same plugins that I use for, all my mixes in regards to vocals. Does that mean I use all those plugins? No, but it just helps me have a starting point. Now, The part that I disagree with is copying and pasting all of your vocal settings from a previous song to the new one. I just think there's too much risk with that, and you just kind of lose the artistic value. You can do that, sure, and it might sound fine, whatever. But I think, like, especially for this album too, like, this is a perfect example. You go from something like Good News straight into Ambidextrous. Clearly, one's more hip hop, the other one's like very bluegrass hip hop. Like, I'm not gonna copy and paste those settings onto Ambidextrous. I want it to feel a little bit more like it's homey. Even though it's a hip hop song, I still want it to like punch, but I don't want it to sound like a super kind of Drake in your face vocal. So that's why I have these plugins on here, and I talk about these plugins every week. But I think it's important to note that, I really listen to what's going on in the chorus and like the notes, even what Connor and Nick are singing. Like, some of those frequencies have to be shifted out and stuff, So anyways, as I talk about this, just know that every week's gonna look pretty similar, even if it's a different artist. But I still talk about it just so you guys understand, like, even the finest details of the EQs and the compressors and stuff like that make a huge difference. And so for starters, I have the EQ. I pretty much, here's the one consistency. I always high pass a vocal. And then there's some just kind of honky, stuff in here in Connor's thing. And then here's my imaginary line. If you haven't seen my other videos before, I always start with a EQ and a compressor to help the vocal feel like someone's talking to me in the room, especially on songs like this where there's two different people. I like to have the vocal be consistent, so I'll have an EQ on each vocal and a compressor on each vocal, doing super minimal stuff, but just making it sound like this, right? We're talking. And then after that, I'll add EQ for color, and I'll add another compressor for color, and really kind of bring the vocal to life. But here's my imaginary line. This is my first compressor, technically. This is my first EQ, and then this is my first compressor. And so it's doing really minimal stuff. Let me bypass all this other stuff. Okay, so you'll see here, it's doing super minimal things. So check this out.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step, two step.
Here's the second EQ.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step.
Second compressor.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step, two step, ain't nobody catching us.
Saturation.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step, two step, ain't nobody catching us.
De-esser.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step, two step, ain't nobody catching us.
And then fresh air.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step, two step, ain't nobody catching us.
And so every time I bypass these plugins, obviously it's coming to life a little bit more. And then I drive my smash and my overdrive. I use these pretty often. It's all just to taste, though, because sometimes if I go too hard on this, it's like too smashed. If I use this too much, it's too gritty. So you just have to kind of play around with those settings.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step, two step, ain't nobody catching us.
And it makes a massive difference. I mean, honestly, that kind of sometimes is my secret sauce. And then soothe. I was having some weird frequency stuff with Connor. Into a verb here. Now you can see here I have this Vox Verb 1, not on the whole bus, just on the chorus part right here. And that's going into this bedroom Vox Verb 1 right here, this bedroom preset that I have talked about a lot. I really love it. It's got this kind of cool stereo thing, and it really does make it sound like it's in a bedroom. And the reason why I think it's so important is because, especially on this song, you hear this part.
One hand, two hand, get some ambidextrous. One step.
Oh, it's muted somewhere. Anyways, you hear that part, and it just feels like it should be some guy singing in his bedroom. So that's, pretty loud. And then the normal verb that's on all of the vocals right here on this main bus, it's just kind of a longer verb. And now it's the same thought process for Nick. It's the same kind of EQ, hitting out some of those crazy frequencies at the very beginning, a compressor that's, working very low, and then EQ for shape, compressor for shape and color, saturation for color, the de-esser settings that you can see here, the fresh air, it's a little different. I needed a little bit more air from him than I did from Connor. And now, finally, I have ad-libs and stuff that Connor sends, and now this is just the relationship that him and I have. But he just sends me over treated ad-libs, and in my opinion, there's no point in recreating that. It's too much of a waste of time. Unless the ad-libs sound bad, then we kind of work on it together. But Connor and Nick are good enough engineers to figure that all out by themselves, like these right here.
Whoa. Nah.
They sound fine. Now, at the end of my mix bus, I have all music and I have all vocals. Clearly, all the music goes here, all the vocals go here. And I use that for automation purposes if I need it. Like you can see here, I did a little bit actually from the verse to the chorus, just certain parts of the song, like especially in mix notes. Connor will be like, hey, can you turn everything up? It's really easy to just kind of do this at the end. And then I have plugins on here for glue, some gain, a little bit of gain, but it's mainly for glue, just to kind of tighten everything up. And then that all goes into the mix bus here. And this is also the mastering bus, essentially. With a lot of hip hop stuff that I work on, I kind of just master into it. It's a whole separate topic. I'll dive into that later. It's not kind of that's not the standard, I would say, but yeah, I'll save that for another time. Anyways, here's Gold Clip. Here's kind of my favorite pairing, especially for mix bus stuff. It's made a lot of my mixes super loud without absolutely killing the transients and stuff, or distorting it. It's this Gold Clip thing here going into Pro L2. I've been really liking the I've been really liking the transparent style here. True Peak, limiting it 4 so it's not blowing up your computer, bringing it down just a little bit here. So you're really just kind of affecting the gain knob. And this is crazy, but I actually really like the attack setting and the release settings on here. Now, I'll mess around with it if I need to, but it's kind of just a golden middle ground. And that's the whole song, so let's take a listen.
That's a good question.
H-I-J-K, we ain't heard of L. Was kinda tough when I learned to spell. I'm charged up, I'm a Duracell. Was kinda quiet, then I heard him yell.
Back in, like I never left it.
Earn my stripes now like I did reffing.
Blood type.
Awesome. Anyways, if you're still with me, I appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or comments, please comment below. Love to answer them. That said, I'll see you next week.